Jacob Harlan never dreamed he'd end up levying in a water tower. After 4 decades fixing old arcade games and vending machines relics, nobody made parts for any more. The idea started to feel oddly right. The world around him had changed. The quiet woods and open fields of his childhood were gone, swallowed by cookie-cutter suburbs with fake stone facades, built to look eternal but flimsy as cardboard beneath. So when the old water tower, a rusty, bone-white skeleton nobody wanted, went up for auction, Jacob paid cash. Over 2 years, he turned it into a home not out of some grand, rebellious VY shown, but because it felt solid. Real. Concrete legs, steel skin, and a VYEW from the top that let him see the world for what it was. Jacob wasn't a poet. He didn't care for nostalgia. What he had was a knack for understanding how things held together. Pipes, gears, GRA, VY tie. Water always flowed down, and from his perch, he could trace its path, predict its pull. That kept him grounded in a world that seemed hell-bent on pretending it wasn't crumbling. His land sat outside the local community council's grip. He made damn sure of that, filing deeds, updating land use codes, keeping his hill free from their rules. Down below, the neighborhood was their domain, rows of tidy houses, manicured lawns, trash bins lined up like soldiers every Friday. The council policed Shrub Heights, slapped fines on Christmas lights left up past January, and generally stayed out of his way. Jacob skipped their meetings, tossed their flyers, and built his own access road, winding asphalt ribbon flanked by drainage ditches, reinforced with gravel, watched by a lone security camera. It wasn't pretty, but it worked better than anything they maintained. For 6 years, he lived unbothered. No Union VY TED guests, no unsolicited packages, just the hum of his workshop, the wind in the pines, and a fridge he kept running because he knew how to fix it. Then came the rain. 3 days of it, not biblical, just steady, sometimes a whisper, sometimes a roar that shook the tin roof. Jacob didn't worry. His drainage system was solid, tested years ago when he'd paved the slope. He'd spent decades watching water carve its own paths, ignoring blueprints, seeking the lowest point. The problem, he knew, was never the water. It was people trying to stop it from going where it belonged. So when he drove home from town that gray Thursday and found his road blocked by a wall of sandbags 7 rows high, 3 deep, curved like a fortress at his goatee, didn't lose it. Not yet. He sat in his truck, wipers slapping, staring at the tan municipal bags, black-stitched, labeled in weatherproof ink. They weren't tossed haphazardly. Someone had built this with care, like a science project. He stepped into the rain, boots sinking in mud, and saw stickers on each bag. Saw Zone 4 saw. It meant nothing to him, but the precision it cataloged, numbered order of it felt colder than the downpour. He called the number on a laminated sign staked nearby. Saw temporary flood mitigation. Council authorized. Saw 2 rings, then a polite, detached voice answered, explaining it was a runoff control initiative for high-risk slopes. Jacob gave his name and address. The woman paused, typed, then said, "Yes, Zone 4. Your property's elevation creates an excessive drain burden downhill. The bags would stay through the weekend." When he asked what gave him the right to block his only road without warning, she cited emergency infrastructure powers and told him to file a written appeal. Then she hung up. Jacob stood there, rain soaking his jacket, not because he was lost, but because he was measuring how far they were willing to push him. He drove the long way home, a rocky fire trail he hadn't used since a storm washed half of it out years ago. It was dicey, but he made it, hands trembling not from anger, but from the clarity of being targeted. They hadn't called, hadn't left a note, hadn't even knocked. They'd just shown up, built their wall, and left, betting he'd stay quiet, swallow the inconvenience, because that's what people do when safety and emergency get thrown around. It wasn't about the rain. It was about control. That night, Jacob didn't sleep. He polished an old jukebox cabinet, the kind that still played when the world forgot how it worked. As the storm roared outside, he thought not of revenge, but of correction. Pressure returned, precise, just enough to remind them that water didn't only flow downhill. Morning brought silence, Not peace, but a heavy, waiting stillness. No crows, no dripping gutters, just quiet. When Jacob stepped onto his tower's landing, he saw why. The sandbag wall had doubled, now shoulder-high, wide enough to stop a tank. A new sign, glossy and aggressive, screamed saw Zone 4 containment. High-risk discharge. Entry restricted. Saw no signature, just raw authority. The incline was slick and water was pooling at his tower's base, backing up because the bags blocked his trench. The ground was soft, too soft, threatening collapse. Then he saw a HOA woman in an orange raincoat, tossing another bag into place, moving like she was laying bricks. She didn't notice him until she turned, then gave a tight, unapologetic smile. Broad-shouldered, dyed brown hair, cheeks red from the wind, she introduced herself as Karen, Safety Subcommittee. No ID, no proof. Karen marched up, boots squelching, and said, "I assume you've seen the reinforcement. We were notified about an overflow threat from your parcel." Her voice was sharp, like she was used to cutting people off. When Jacob asked why no one had consulted him, she smiled wider, like he was a kid who didn't get it. Flood risk doesn't wait for NVY Tatians. Your parcel's at the end of the slope, ideal for flow regulation. She waved at some imaginary map, citing runoff models and joint mitigation authority. Jacob pointed out his land wasn't under their jurisdiction. She tilted her head. Water doesn't care who owns what. Then she walked off back to her bags, Leah VYing him in the drizzle. That afternoon, Jacob tried the land commission. For transfers later, a kid who sounded barely out of high school mumbled about broader easements during water events and said no emergency declaration was on record yet. It hit him slow. This wasn't a mistake. It was a plan. By evening, he found a fresh trench, not natural, cut along the sandbag wall, curve VYing toward his land's edge, ending at a marker. Saw auxiliary diversion path, Zone 4B saw. No pipes, just a raw gouge to flood his property and spare theirs. It wasn't flood control. It was sacrifice. Voicemails piled euponymous, cryptic, one just rain and heavy breathing. Jacob felt the quiet shift, not fear, but certainty. They'd picked the wrong hill. The next day, he filmed everything pooling water, collapsing soil, the trench's unnatural flow. He backed it up on drives, stored them safe, because people who trespassed without permission also made EVY Denke vanish. The county hydrology office dodged him, citing emergency conditions that needed no permits. The new property inspector never called back. They were playing keep away, hoping he'd snap and give them an excuse. Then came the letters. One accused him of interference with emergency infrastructure. No statute, no contact. Another, slipped under his door, had a QR code linking to a shady website with grainy photos of him by his trench, caption saw Zone 4 disturbance saw. It wasn't a council anymore. It was a vendetta. That night, the tower's lights flickered, then died. Motion sensors screamed 3 figures digging near his slope, pouring something steaming, likely quicklime to break the soil. Jacob's voice cut through the dark. 10 seconds. They bolted, dropping a canister caught on 6 live feeds. He preserved the sight, filed it all, and waited. The storm loomed, the air thick with a metallic tang. At noon, the sky turned solid, clouds like concrete. Jacob's trench was choking, debris swirling, water backing up. Then he saw a FEMA Green City truck, 2 figures dumping trash bags into his drainage line. No hesitation. He fired up his old diesel loader, tires chewing mud, and roared down the fire trail. Scoop by scoop, he dumped gravel and cement chunks across the council's driveway, building a levee that sent water straight to their neglected lot. The rain hammered, water pooling at their meeting hall, climbing fast. Their generator drowned, lights flickered, and emergency bulbs glowed in quiet panic. Jacob parked the loader, checked his trench clearing, barely and walked home as the rain stopped dead. Morning was crisp, the slope stable, his trench flowing clean. The council lot was a swamp, their generator fried, but the sandbags he'd moved were gone, erased overnight. 2 stakes formed a neon saw X saw, labeled saw obstruction saw. Denial, not cleanup. Jacob sent his EVY Denke to the district maps. Footage not for a fight, but to exist. Karen came later, no smile, clutching a folder. "You're jeopardizing more than your parcel," she snapped, showing grainy photos of his loader. "Comply, or face a hazard downgrade." Jacob stepped closer. "You turn my land into a basin. I've got proof." She left, silent. Days later, a sedan left an envelope at his gate. Saw no further action will be taken. Saw the signs vanished, the stakes pulled, the tension faded. Grass grew, birds returned, but Jacob stayed VY Gillant. They hadn't quit, he'd paused. His tower stood, not because he'd screamed or sued, but because he'd matched their force with function. GRA VY Taiwan. What would you have done in Jacob's shoes? Fought legally, move the bags yourself, or cave to the council? Would he right to redirect the water, or did he escalate too far? Should he trust their retreat, or is something worse coming? Drop your thoughts below. Hit like if this got your blood pumping, and subscribe for more stories that make you question who's really in control.